Sweet. We're live, guys. Give us a second for some people to join in on the stream and for us to retweet this. Here we go. So for everyone tuning in, we are about to talk about Hibachi and the Wynn upgrade on Celestia and SP1. We have Succinct co-founder Uma with us, the one and only, and also Varun from Hibachi and Hashflow. So lots to unpack on this upgrade. But while we get started, why don't you guys just give a quick background on yourselves and the projects that you represent?
Right. So, hey guys, Varun here. So from Hibachi, and we are a privacy first perhaps exchange that also happens to be pretty fast. So that's the quick, short and sweet background. Using Celestia underneath and SP1 for proving, and making sure that we are not doing anything funny.
Love it. Uma?
I'm Uma. I'm the co-founder and CEO of Succinct. We're building a zkVM SP1 that powers Hibachi and other verifiable exchanges, and then the prover network that generates proofs fast and cheap for SP1 users.
Brilliant. So before we get into Hibachi and Wynn specifically, I just want to give some background context on where the industry is at right now. So I think everyone's aware of the success of Hyperliquid. And Hyperliquid is a central limit order book, which is a CLOB essentially. And CLOBs have kind of emerged now as an actual viable thing to build on chain. And they are kind of the status quo, state of the art markets for TradFi. But now we can build them on chain and with lots of new properties that you can't have off chain. And so I see Hibachi as an emerging leader in this new category of CLOBs. And specifically within this whole category of CLOBs, there's this thesis that I like to call CLOBs on blobs, which is that rollups specifically have certain advantages over general purpose, building a CLOB on a general purpose chain, which we'll get into. But with that background, let's talk specifically about Hibachi and this Wynn upgrade. I know that it has a lot to do with privacy, but why don't you, Varun, take a stab at unpacking what Wynn is and why you think this is a differentiator in this overall CLOB market, and then maybe Uma can also chime in as well.
No, absolutely. So I think TLDR Wynn, it was kind of named after the infamous Wynn incident. James Wynn. Yeah. So
maybe give a background to that for people who aren't aware.
So TLDR is there's this Hyperliquid whale account that ended up losing lots and lots of money, like
$100 million or something
like that. And one of the reasons why that happened is because everything he was posting was basically public to everybody, given the fact that Hyperliquid is a L1, and as a result, anything you do is on chain and therefore visible. And in this particular case, that was a little too visible for anybody to use that to their advantage, right? So, and then obviously that massively backfired, and at least that's the story that we've been told and we've seen. So, but anyway, so I think this is one of the reasons why we decided to go with the whole Wynn upgrade. The idea was that so how do we achieve three things, right? The whole purpose here was you maintain a fast CLOB that is actually on par with the OKXs, the Binances of the world. You don't allow user positions or balances or any of that to be public and be auditable or be visible to anybody, right? So now if you achieve these two things, that's cool. How does it? This is pretty much every other exchange does, like Coinbase, etc. So what makes this interesting? So the last point being, how do you preserve these two properties while also allowing users to exit from the exchange in a world where the exchange stops posting proofs, right? So, have a fast latency, low latency CLOB make sure that user information is not publicly available to anybody, and then also allow users to verify that the order book was correctly run using ZK proofs. And lastly, allow for exits in a world where the exchange stops posting proofs, right? And this is the first step towards that end goal, right? So, and that's the general motivation behind building this.
Yeah, and we'll get more into that too, but like this is the whole notion of verifiable finance, VFi or VApps, which is like a more general version of that I know Succinct is helping to pioneer. So Uma, I don't know if you want to chime in at all on Wynn and the specific features you think that differentiate it in this landscape.
Yeah, I think Varun, maybe you touched upon this a little bit, but this idea of centralized and therefore also can be private but verifiable is a pretty interesting area of the design space that I think hasn't been explored as much. And then you have people like Varun who are starting to explore it with Hibachi. And I think in general, that design pattern, as Nick, you said, there's going to be verifiable finance, verifiable apps, is something that's going to like continue over the next few years. Also, sorry, that's a fire alarm going off, so I'm going to mute myself and let you guys talk.
New York does that too, and MFR, yeah. You keep going. It wasn't that loud.
Oh, okay. Yeah, it's just loud for me. So yeah, I think the VAP paradigm of centralized and verifiable is very interesting. And I think there's a few key properties of it that actually end in like better product experiences for users, which I think is like the ultimate North Star. So first of all, you have this like real-time feedback where the user can submit a transaction, get a confirmation in real time. So it doesn't even feel like you're using a chain. You don't have to like wait for block times or whatever. So that's awesome. Next thing is like privacy, which I think in any Web2 app, people expect that. Not all your data is like fully publicly available. Obviously, like there's certain benefits to having your data fully available in terms of verifiability. But now at least you have a spectrum of options that developers can choose from. And then if they think privacy is the trade-off their users are looking for, then they can have that option. And then finally, for the developers, the last benefit is actually like you can just code whatever you want. So Varun, I don't know if you have thoughts on this, but I think it'd probably be impossible to code something like Hibachi in the EVM. Like that idea is just completely ridiculous, right?
Yeah, no, I mean, that's fair. I think the design philosophy we're adhering to here is that don't put everything on chain. In fact, that's a stupid idea to put everything on chain, right? So like especially like Uniswap and Aave or Compound are outliers. But if you want to go and add more complexity to your application, perps being one of them, it's just nearly like it's not possible to, at least not with what's available today, it's not possible to achieve like a really high performant application like the Nasdaqs, the Binances, and so on, and also expect that to be running on a decentralized L1, right? So I think the right approach here is to run the applications like the way they're meant to be, and then only verify the critical operations on chain as necessary and when necessary, right? So, and that I think is a sufficient, that is a pretty sweet spot, right? So therefore like VAP or VFi, whatever you call it. So.
Yeah, I think I think there's also this notion of, I mean, people talk about like decentralized a lot, right? But decentralized is sort of a blanket term that encompasses a lot of different potential features for an application. And I think verifiability is one of the most important ones, especially for an exchange, because it's all about like custody of your funds. And when you have verifiability and the ability to exit, which is what the people have asked me, like, well, why do you post data if it's all private and encrypted anyway? And it's because it enables you to reconstruct the state and exit the chain if you have to, which is just so crucial. Like, I don't think people will put their funds at risk, at least not like, users with a lot of like whales, essentially. So anyway, but then like you're not, by also choosing to be a single sequencer, you can have this ultra fast latency. Now you sacrifice one component of decentralization, which is censorship resistance, but like, that could very well be a trade-off that actually users want to make. So it's kind of interesting how we're opening up the design space here. So I really agree with Uma. So anyway, like moving on, I'm curious just to understand at a high level for the viewers how Wynn works, like under the hood. Like what happens from when a user is placing a trade to that trade getting matched by the operator to then however it interacts with Succinct SP1 and maybe even a prover network, and with Celestia and that whole like life cycle. I'm curious to dive into that a little bit with Varun and Uma, and I want to hear like Varun's experience working with these stacks. You know, they're relatively new. This is like really new tech. You know, both SP1 and Celestia. I think people are would be excited to hear what it's like from a builder who's actually shipped a product.
You gonna go first, Uma, or you want me to?
You go first, Varun.
Okay,
Yeah,
cool.
let's hear it from the dev.
All right. So sounds good. Yeah, I think the general flow here is right. You run an off-chain, right? So on your AWS, like pretty centralized. Like there is like no decentralization at the CLOB level, but that's also by design. I think that's kind of how you achieve that low latency you want for performance, right? So then the second step becomes once the trading is done, the matching is done. How do you know the matching was performed correctly, right? So what's going on behind the scenes is all the trades that users post and that they sign with their keys, right? So basically, what the ZK circuit is proving is it's making sure that trades were signed by the user's keys, and it's checking to see the trading algorithm. It followed the steps. Make sure the liquidations happen correctly, verifying it against the Oracle price and things like that. So it's checking the entire trading logic, and then basically making sure that the state transitions that happened, aka the user balance is changing, they happened according to the rules that have been laid out. Right, that's the guest program. That's what it's doing. And then once that thing is done, the ZK proof has been computed. That gets posted to the respective base chains where the users have put in their deposits, right? That's the ZK side of things. And the other component, obviously, is you have ZK proofs, that's cool, but then how do you know that this proof was in fact pointing to the CLOB, right? So not some random item, right? So that's sort of where DA becomes important. Like you need data to be able to prove that. But then posting all this information on a public DA basically once again goes back to we just exposed user information, which is something many users don't want. So this is sort of where the whole encryption comes into play. What you're saying is we encrypt the information before we post that to Celestia, the club and blob, right? So that's basically the reason why we're encrypting it and posting that so that user information is not public. And then more importantly, right? So now that you have a proof and you have encrypted state on a DA, this is what allows you to exit. Like, let's say if the exchange, actually, Nick, I think you mentioned censorship resistance here. So I think this is also where, like, if for some reason the exchange stops posting, the worst thing it can do right now as a centralized operator is not include transactions in the proof, right? So, and if a user starts detecting that the proofs are not, his transactions are not being included in the proof, right? Or if there is any sense that that is the case, then today we have the decryption key, but then the end state is going to be use a set of validators that can basically freeze the contract and then use the decryption key to allow for exit without exchange's permission, right? So that's the end state we want to get to, and that's kind of how the entire system is set up.
So before we move on, like, how was your experience building on SP1 and stuff?
Pretty good, actually. Really, really seamless. So I think pretty much did the entire thing in about 2 weeks, right? So I think Aurelian, big shout out to that. So I think he helped us a lot with the migration. So I think it was a pretty straightforward setup. So I think that was pretty stellar. So I think that's a good shout out to the entire SP1 engineering team for answering your questions at like midnight. So
and Celestia, how is it working on the Celestia stack?
Same, absolutely. Right. So I think Celestia and the Nuke and others were working with Succinct's team separately, and then our team was actually working with Nuke directly because this thing started it was 3 months ago, where I proposed this to Jacob. I think this is what we should do. And then the whole thing got together and we got it done in like a month and a half. So it was actually that the whole idea from design to iteration shipping something Like we pretty much built. Yeah, it was like in the last 3.5 months, we built a lot. Right? So, and I think it was like just everyone coming together and coordinating. That was phenomenal. So
the cool thing too is that this your idea essentially has created an entirely new like product category for Celestia private DA. Essentially, and there's a reusable component that we foresee a lot of demand for, because there's a lot of applications that want the verifiability that DA gives you, but without having to actually publish everything fully publicly. And so it's going to be really cool to see that product like kind of spin out from this initial, work with you and grow into something of its own. Uma, what's your, do you have anything you want to highlight about like the architecture, how it works under the hood, or SP1's role in Wynn, and I don't know, your experience working on this project?
Yeah, I think the thing Varun said that was cool is like it took them 2 weeks to kind of like migrate it, which is pretty short amount of time.
That's insane, honestly.
Yeah, which is awesome. And then I think like something that was really cool for me to see was just the dream of literally just write Rust, just write your logic in Rust is true. Like Varun and your team, I think you have 0 ZK cryptography people, right? And you were still able to like use all this stuff. And I think it's just yet another proof point that like ZK is actually very easy to use. It's actually here. It's actually being used in production. It's actually being used to power real stuff that secures real value with real users. So I think as like someone who's building kind of like a more platform technology, and I'm sure this is the case for you, Nick, too, it's really rewarding to see the actual people building on top like see success and like use it. So that was very cool to like see it all come together.
Yeah. And Uma, do you see like a lot of synergy between Succinct and Celestia going forward?
Oh yeah, definitely. I mean, I think basically if you're writing this like really high throughput specialized application using a ZK VM, you are not going to just like use Ethereum DA. Like it's like old generation technology. And so, yeah, I think like Celestia makes a lot of sense for all of these use cases. And then conversely, if you're just posting data to Celestia, like Celestia is so minimal that you can't do execution on there, right? So you're just posting data, but you need to be able to verify what that data is actually doing and like what impact that has on like the balances and the state roots and like having all those rollups talk to each other. And obviously ZK is going to be the only way you're going to do that. And the only way people are going to use ZK in a same way is with ZK VMs. So I think it's actually super complementary.
I so agree. Yeah. And the future is like coming a lot sooner than I think people expect. So while we're on that topic, actually, just quickly, I mean, part of the clouds on blobs thesis is the idea that the clouds are going to eat a lot of DA, because, if you're posting every trade on chain, these are about every 5 milliseconds, there's like a bunch of trades updating everything. That ends up being a ton of transaction volume. So I'm curious, just from Varun's perspective, like how do you see the demand for DA growing as a function of like the success of Hibachi? And I guess also this equally applies to Succinct and the prover network and just Succinct in general, in that like the more trades, the more like proving capacity you need. So I guess this is like relevant to both Celestia and Succinct, but I'm curious to hear the way you think about it, Varun.
Yeah, no, I think I think I saw the data like just last week we were already like in the top 5 of posting on Celestia. I haven't seen what the number is today, but no, I think, and this is like with us like not even doing that much volume, like we're just still in the bootstrapping phase. So with this going like up, I can that demand is going to be a lot higher. So that is already something I was gonna tell Jacob, like, hey, I think this demand is about to increase significantly. So yes, that's going to be a lot.
And each transaction is like what, 100 bytes, or do you have that number off the top of your head? Roughly each order, I should say.
I don't know the number, and I have to quickly check to see exactly what.
Yeah. Anyway, I've had this conversation with a few other collab builders, and typically it's about 100 bytes per trade order. And then like if you start thinking about, even just doing 1,000 TPS, which is not that much for a collab, it really adds up over time. I don't know, Uma, you have something you want to say?
I mean, yeah, the same calculations you're doing for DA also apply to proving. Like 1,000 TBS adds up for, the types of proofs that are being generated. And I think like the interesting thing here that's applicable for both Celestia and Succinct Network is CLOBs have real economic activity, right? Like Hyperliquid, obviously, everyone's like, oh, they make so much revenue. I'm sure your guys' protocol will also make a lot of revenue. And then, we are providing the services that make like having that revenue be possible. So then there is actual real revenue to be like paid back to like both for DA and for proving and these networks. So for me, that's why it was very interesting to have this sort of application, because like real economic activity is like at the lifeblood of crypto, and obviously perp dexes are like the number one PMF application.
Yeah. On that point, I mean, when Eclipse was doing their TurboTap campaign on top of Celestia, which was just like a stress test of like what throughput can Eclipse and Celestia support, and they were doing, I don't know, more TPS than Solana in certain points in time, and everything worked. But everyone was like, well, but this is all kind of BS spam transactions. And the interesting thing about this whole CLOBS thing is that it's going to be similar amounts of TPS, if not actually significantly more, but it's also economically like valuable transactions that would actually pay for block space, for proving. So I'm very much on board with that. Uma, one more question for you is basically like, this is a very interesting moment for zkVMs. I think Wynn is a specifically interesting example in that it also, is a privacy oriented design. Do you like, why now for zkVMs, and what do you think that like privacy is also an angle that you guys are going to be leaning more heavily into, because it's not just succinctness, but also the zero knowledge component of ZK?
Yeah, the why now question around zkVMs is a good one. I think like if you look at the arc of zkVMs, we announced SP1 a little over a year ago, but then to get it audited and production ready was like August, September 2024. And then to get it like fast, and we get our turbo upgrade in like February. And then since then, it's only been 4 months. So often, as actually Varun probably will tell you, the hardest part about using a zkVM is actually not the zkVM part, because it makes it so easy, because it is just writing normal Rust code. It's actually like the rest of the protocol. Like building a good perps exchange is just really, really difficult. Like the business logic is really difficult. So I think the why now is like super clear. It's like, okay, this stuff was like fast and production ready only even like at the start of this year. Then you have to build out your whole protocol, which is really hard. And that takes a few months. And now we're starting to see these systems go live. And so it makes sense that all these things take some time. And now we're starting to see like the beginnings of real economic value secured by zkVMs. So it's like a particularly nascent, exciting time. In terms of privacy, I think for most of our use cases, actually, like, and most rollups and stuff, I would say the grand majority of block space today is default public, right? Like Bitcoin, Ethereum, every single rollup, Solana, even these verifiable exchanges for the most part, Hyperliquid's default public. So I think Hibachi is maybe one of the only ones that's private but verifiable. I think we don't, obviously, if you're using our prover network, you have to be doing stuff that's public because all the provers are public. So I think we'll actually still continue having more of a focus on default public things, because that's also like where the bulk of our customer demand is. And then Hibachi is using like a separate private network to like service their use case and needs. But now that we have that set up, we can serve more private customers. So maybe there will be more people somewhere.
I like that. So we have maybe around like 5-10 minutes left. I wanted to just quickly, Varun, give you an opportunity to address any of the FUD around this. I saw some privacy purists being like, this is not real privacy, because real privacy would be private from an operator. I also saw L2Beat saying like, oh, how can you exit if the contract is, controlled, by an EOA or whatever. I want to give you the floor to address these comments.
Yeah, no, I mean, like I think that the thing that L2Bit pointed out, like the EOA controls the upgradability at the moment. I mean, it's correct, right? You know, they're not wrong, but also I don't think this is like super early stage of the product. So to expect us to have like 100 people validator set to upgrade contracts is like pretty unreasonable, right? So I don't think it's like either or. I think the way we're thinking about that is start with something that works,
Mhm.
right, and then eventually either just get rid of the upgradability completely or decentralize that set, right? So yes, the concern that L2Beat raised was valid, and I think we're working towards getting to that point, right? So, but it's not going to happen overnight. It's going to take a few iterations before we get there, where the product is more mature, right? So, now on the
Yeah.
second point around the operator having access to the user information, like that is the part. I think it's a pretty reasonable trade-off to make, right? So because from an exchange point of view, most of the users don't want their transactions publicly available on the blockchain or like
Mhm.
the positions be tracked, but they are completely okay with the operator having access to it, right? So
Yeah.
yes, you can argue that in an ideal scenario, no one sees it, but objectively speaking, if you look at Binance, Coinbase, Bybit, etc., uh, people are literally giving KYC information there, right? So, and they're still using it. So, obviously, by using DEX, you're already bypassing that step. And then now, I think all the operators doing is they're using plain text to match orders, and we can do client side encryption, and then run. For example, we can run the whole thing inside a trusted environment, and make it like a complete dark pool if you want to, but then that just
Mhm.
comes with a massive scalability cost, and then also over time if you want to build, because that just adds latency right away, right? So that's at
Yeah.
least a millisecond latency added instantly, and then on top of that, if you want to scale to like much larger markets, like I think there's a limitation of 128 uh, MB. I forgot like the Intel SGX memory capacity. So I think I don't think we can scale to like Binance level if you really want to go, if you go this path. So as a result, we're like, okay, for now, if you want to achieve like that sub millisecond or even like low single digit millisecond latency while obscuring the transactions from public visibility, like you do in L1s or L1 dexes, this is actually a pretty good sweet spot to achieve those things. Like yeah, like there's no free lunch, right? But in this case, uh, we think that's a pretty reasonable trade off to achieve what we're achieving, right? So that being
Yeah.
said, we are actually looking into other ways to see if we can do something like that. Maybe you can do some kind of auto matching on encrypted data and then compute a ZK proof, but then that brings up all fully homomorphic encryption and things like that, which is again, it's computationally expensive, and the extra benefit of doing that is like almost non-existent, at least for an exchange user who's more wanting to do like high frequency trading, things like that. Maybe if you're doing like messaging or building something like Signal, that is a different use case altogether, right? So that's not what we're building.
Yeah. Yeah. I think there's room for like a fully private, you
Yeah.
know, DEX or something, but I think that's a different category of product than what you're trying to build, and that would make very different trade-offs, and that's great. But I think that you guys want to provide the right amount of privacy while still providing latency and all the other things that are actually going to enable you to be competitive with like centralized exchanges pretty much. So I'm totally with you on that. So as we wrap up, I know you guys both are sort of champions of this verifiable app, verifiable finance movement. I just want to hear your guys' bigger visions for Succinct and Hibachi in the role of like advancing this verifiability movement, and in general, like what are you guys' roadmaps going forward? What can people expect from your guys' projects over the next few months?
Yeah, I'm happy to go. One comment I wanted to make on what you were saying earlier, Nick, is I think often crypto people are really maximalist and like, oh, if it's not fully private, it doesn't count. And I think Varun and like especially the moment right now is builders who are much more pragmatic. It's like, okay, we are going to improve on the sex experience because we can't take your funds and not all your positions are open. But yeah, the operator can see your trades. And so I think like the market, I think, is starting to reward these more like pragmatic, doesn't have to be at one end of the spectrum views. And I think that's really good from like a UX product perspective. So yeah, something I'm excited to see more of. In terms of roadmap, I mean, over the next few months, we're launching our protocols mainnet. So right now it's, you can still use it, it's in testnet.
Nice.
And yeah, so that's exciting. We're opening it up to like provers all across the world. So that's going to be exciting. That's coming very soon. And yeah, continuing to make SP1 the best DKVM, faster, cheaper, have the most provers on our network. And then really continue supporting like all these app builders. I feel like Hibachi is just the start of, let's directly write a high throughput application in a ZKVM and then put it out in the world. I think there's going to be a lot more of these VAPs out there, and even some other people who've been experimenting with it behind the scenes. So I'm excited to like continue supporting them, continue building the ecosystem. Yeah.
Yeah, it really is a totally new paradigm for building applications. Write it in Rust and then just prove it and ship it. It's really mind blowing. Varun.
So our product roadmap right now is more user centric, just making the exchange really, really good. So things you can expect like in the coming weeks is like even like this week with TPSL. I think you asked me, many people asking with the Python SDK, and things like making the deposit withdrawals like even more seamless. So those are like the short term wins. Then we can expect vaults to come back or actually be a next feature that is going to be coming up very shortly. And then I think one of the bigger features we are planning to build right now is like build out a full on unified account system that allows you to do basically spot hedging, add multi-collateral, native lending, all these things using one account. So the goal is to minimize the margin requirements or the collateral needed to do more interesting things, right? So, and you're doing these things from a features point of view, then obviously also bootstrapping liquidity. So the goal is to like these things that make traders user experience far more superior, and then also continue to do things that allow you to bootstrap liquidity, right? So it's more product driven at this moment, and I think that's how it's going to be, right? So that is the I would say short to mid-term roadmap that you can expect from us in the next 10 to 12 months.
Amazing. Well, guys, thank you so much for joining. Thanks everyone in the audience for tuning in. Excited for the future of Succinct, verifiable apps, ZK, Hibachi, and Klobs on blobs. Lots to look forward to in the next few months. Thanks again for joining.
Yeah.
Yeah. Good live stream.
Thank you. All right.